It was a freezing night in Pittsburgh. Two young sisters huddled behind a dumpster, starving, forgotten, and alone. One of them made a desperate choice to steal a loaf of bread. But what she didn't know was that the man who caught her wasn't just any man. He was a millionaire, and he had a past that would change everything. This isn't just a story about survival. It's a story about humanity, compassion, and how one act of kindness can rewrite a destiny. The wind screamed like a ghost through the narrow alleyways of downtown Pittsburgh, rattling broken street signs and whistling past rows of abandoned buildings. It was the kind of cold that didn't just touch your skin. It clawed its way into your bones. Snow fell steadily, like soft ashes from a broken sky, covering everything in a silent white shroud. The city was asleep, unaware of the two tiny souls tucked away behind a filthy dumpster behind a forgotten grocery store. Sophie, only 12, had her arms wrapped tightly around her younger sister, Gracie, who was just 8. They sat under a stack of damp cardboard boxes and tattered plastic bags, trying to trap what little warmth their bodies could generate. Sophie's coat was 3 sizes too small and riddled with holes. Gracie wore mismatched gloves, one pink, the other missing. Her nose was red and dripping, her lips chapped from the wind. They hadn't had anything warm in their stomachs for over 48 hours. Just a stale cracker and melted snow scooped from a trash lid. Gracie leaned her head on Sophie's shoulder and whispered, "Do you think Mom sees us right now?" Sophie bit her lip, her throat tightening. "Yeah," she lied softly. "She's probably telling the angels to keep us warm." But the truth burned inside her. Their mother had died 6 months ago after a long, painful battle with cancer. There was no funeral, no grave with flowers, just a cheap cremation paid for by a social worker. And then nothing. Their father? Gone long before that. Walked out one night and never looked back. No one had come to claim them. No one had even asked. Sophie had tried everything. Begging, knocking on shelters, even walking for miles to churches hoping someone would help. But most turned them away with phrases like, "We're full tonight," or "Try again next week." Gracie's stomach growled loudly, breaking the silence. "I'm hungry," she whispered, tears forming in her eyes. Sophie swallowed hard, trying not to cry with her. She had to be strong. She had to protect Gracie, even if the world had forgotten them. She reached into her pocket and pulled out their last treasure, a tiny picture of their mom, worn and faded. She kissed it, then tucked it back inside. That night, Sophie looked at the back door of the grocery store. She had seen the deliveries before. Knew that sometimes, right before closing, the workers left the back unguarded for a few minutes. Her heart pounded in her chest. Her fingers were shaking, not just from the cold, but from what she was about to do. She looked at Gracie's little face, pale and hollow. The thought of her sister going to sleep hungry again was unbearable. "Stay right here, don't move, I'll be back soon," Sophie said softly. Gracie grabbed her arm. "Don't leave me." Sophie kissed her forehead. "Just 5 minutes, I promise." Then she turned toward the store, her breath fogging in front of her as she stepped into the night. What she didn't know was that her life, and Gracie's, was about to change forever. And it would all begin with a loaf of bread and a pair of watching eyes she didn't know were there. Sophie crouched low behind the stack of trash bins, the icy metal biting through the knees of her thin jeans. Her breath came in short clouds, and her heart raced like a drum inside her chest. It wasn't fear of getting caught that scared her most. It was the thought of failing her sister. Gracie sat curled up, her small hands tucked into her armpits for warmth. Her eyes, wide and trusting, locked onto Sophie's. "I'll sneak in and grab a loaf of bread and some fruit," Sophie whispered, barely audible over the hum of the nearby streetlight. "Just enough to keep us going tonight." Gracie nodded, saying nothing. But her eyes shimmered with both trust and worry, as if she understood this wasn't just a game. It was survival. Just then, headlights swept across the alley. A delivery truck pulled up to the back of the store. 2 men got out, laughing, one holding a clipboard, the other wheeling a cart full of boxed produce. They pushed open the steel door with a loud clank, then disappeared inside, leaving the door half open. Sophie waited, counting the seconds. 1, 2, 3, she whispered to herself. Be brave. Then she ran. Silent as a shadow, she slipped through the doorway and into the narrow, dim hallway behind the store. The smell of fresh bread and old mop water filled her nose. Her stomach twisted at the scent of food so close, so real. She moved quickly, her fingers numb as she grabbed a half loaf of sourdough from the rack and spotted a crate of apples. She took 3, enough to share, but not so many to draw attention. She turned around, her heart pounding with both fear and triumph. Just a few more steps and they'd eat. Just a few more. Hey, what do you think you're doing? The voice was deep, sharp, adult. Sophie froze in place. The apples tumbled from her arms and rolled across the floor like fallen marbles. One hit the wall and bruised. Her breath caught in her throat. She slowly turned to face the voice. There, in the doorway, stood a tall man in a dark coat, not one of the delivery workers. He was older, with graying hair at his temples, clean-shaven, and wearing a long navy wool coat that clearly didn't belong in this side of town. His shoes were polished, and his gloves looked expensive. He didn't look like a store manager or a worker. He looked like someone who had never gone hungry a day in his life. High eyes narrowed as he looked her over. The too small coat, the dirt-smudged face, the hands shaking not from guilt, but from cold. Sophie felt her cheeks burn with shame. Her voice was barely a whisper. I wasn't going to take much. The man stepped forward, his shoes clicking on the tile. Are you stealing? She swallowed, her mouth dry. For a moment she thought about running, about sprinting out the back door into the snow, grabbing Gracie and disappearing into the night. But something inside her, maybe exhaustion, maybe courage, kept her rooted. My sister's hungry, she said softly. She hasn't eaten in 2 days. The man blinked. I wasn't going to take anything else, just bread and apples, she added quickly, her eyes darting toward the dropped fruit. Silence hung heavy between them. The man looked at her. Really looked at her. Not just the dirt on her face or the stolen bread in her hand, but the sadness in her eyes. The desperation, the strength behind her fear. And for a brief moment something flickered in his expression. It wasn't anger. It was recognition. But Sophie didn't notice. Her heart thundered as she waited for what came next. The man stepped forward again. And in that instant, Sophie's entire world was about to change, not through punishment, but through a truth neither of them saw coming. The hallway seemed to stretch in slow motion. The sound of the apples, still gently rolling, echoed louder than it should have in the cold silence that followed the man's voice. Sophie looked up, her breath frozen in her throat. The man was tall, at least 6'2", his broad shoulders filling the narrow hallway. His long, dark blue coat swayed slightly as he stepped forward. Underneath it, a tailored suit clung to his frame. His polished black shoes reflected the overhead lights. His scarf was the color of deep wine, silk, elegant, and completely out of place in this forgotten corner of the city. Everything about him screamed wealth, order, and power. But his eyes, those gray-blue eyes, held something more. A flicker of sorrow. A shadow of pain he tried to hide beneath a composed, cold exterior. Sophie stared at him like a deer caught in headlights, her fingers still clutching the half loaf of bread against her chest. Are you stealing? He repeated, his tone low but controlled. Tears blurred Sophie's vision. Her mouth opened, but no words came out at first. Finally, with a small, cracked voice, she whispered, I'm sorry. My little sister's hungry. We haven't eaten since yesterday morning. I didn't know what else to do. The man didn't respond right away. He looked her over again, slowly this time, not judging, assessing. Her thin frame, her chapped lips, the bruises on her fingers from the cold, the coat that was clearly a hand-me-down, possibly from a donation bin. She wasn't a thief. She was a survivor, and something inside him tightened. He took a small step forward. Where are your parents? Sophie's bottom lip trembled. gone, she whispered. Mom died. Dad left. Before that. Her voice cracked on the last word, and she looked away, ashamed, like even speaking the truth was something to be guilty about. For a long moment, neither of them spoke, the sound of a cooler humming. The faint music from the store's front speakers, the ticking of a clock. Nathaniel Carter didn't know what hit him harder, the fragility in the girl's voice, or the haunting familiarity of her pain. He had come to this store on an unplanned visit, a surprise audit, something he rarely did himself anymore. But he'd been restless that night. Something had pulled him here. And now, standing before this frightened, starving girl, he knew why. He saw himself in her, or more accurately, he saw his mother. He remembered the nights his mother would cry quietly in the kitchen, pretending the rumble in her belly was nothing while giving him the last piece of toast. He remembered the cold nights sleeping in a car, hiding from police, stealing soap from gas station restrooms. He'd never told anyone. Not even his board of directors knew that the founder and CEO of Carter Foods, Inc., one of the largest food companies in the United States, had grown up with holes in his shoes and empty cupboards. That memory, buried under decades of success, now rose like a wave inside him. He cleared his throat. His voice softened. Not fully, but enough for Sophie to feel the shift. What's your name? Sophie blinked, surprised. Sophie, she said quietly, and my sister's name is Gracie. Where is she? Sophie hesitated. Outside, behind the store. She's waiting for me. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. The temperature outside was below freezing. Take me to her. Sophie didn't move at first, but something in his tone told her he meant no harm. She nodded and slowly led him back through the hallway, out the door, and into the biting wind. The cold hit him instantly, but what struck him more was the sight of a little girl curled in a pile of flattened boxes, clutching a teddy bear missing one eye. Her cheeks were red with cold, and her lips moved silently, as if whispering to herself. Gracie looked up when Sophie returned, but her eyes widened in fear at the stranger following behind. Sophie dropped to her knees beside her and held her tightly. It's okay, she said. He's not mad. Nathaniel stood silently, taking in the scene. Two children, alone in the snow, hidden behind a dumpster like forgotten trash. And for the first time in years, the polished, powerful man who had built an empire felt a tear escape down his cheek. He turned away quickly, brushing it off with his glove before either of the girls could see. But inside his heart cracked. These weren't just lost children. They were a mirror of the boy he once was. And he knew, from that very moment, that walking away from them would be the one thing he could never forgive himself for. The silence in the alley was heavy, as if the wind itself paused to witness what was unfolding. Nathaniel stood frozen, staring at the child curled up behind the dumpster. Gracie didn't speak. She just held her worn-out stuffed bear tightly to her chest, its seams split, one ear hanging on by a thread. Her eyes met his, large, blue, scared. It was the look of a child who didn't trust easily. The look of someone who had been let down by too many grown-ups. Nathaniel had seen a lot in his life. Contracts worth millions, rooms full of polished executives, press conferences with fake smiles. But nothing had ever hit him like this, not even close. He didn't see two street kids. He saw human beings the world had thrown away. Sophie knelt beside her sister, wrapping her arms around her to block the cold. She didn't say anything. She didn't beg for forgiveness. She didn't ask for food. And that broke him more than any apology could have. She had already accepted her place in the world, the forgotten corner. Nathaniel took off his scarf and stepped closer, slowly, like approaching a scared animal. He gently wrapped it around Gracie's small shoulders. It's okay, he said softly. You're safe now. The words were foreign to him. He hadn't said them to anyone in years, not since his mother died. Sophie looked up at him, her lips trembling. Why are you being nice to us? He didn't answer. Not yet. He simply extended a hand. Come with me, please. Hesitantly, Sophie helped Gracie to her feet. Gracie still didn't speak, but she clutched Sophie's coat as they followed Nathaniel down the street, her stuffed bear swinging from her arm. 3 blocks later, they came upon a small diner glowing with neon lights, its windows fogged with warmth. Inside, it was nearly empty, just a waitress wiping tables and a tired cook flipping burgers. They entered, and the heat wrapped around them like a blanket. Nathaniel guided them into a booth at the back. The waitress raised an eyebrow at the 2 ragged girls, but when Nathaniel gave her a look, one that said, "Don't question this," she simply nodded and walked away. He ordered 3 bowls of tomato soup, grilled cheese sandwiches, and 2 tall glasses of chocolate milk for the girls. When the food arrived, the girls didn't touch it right away. They just stared at it, as if it might vanish if they moved too quickly. "Go ahead," Nathaniel said gently. "It's yours." Sophie reached first, taking a cautious bite of the sandwich. Her eyes widened. Warm, real, safe. She hadn't tasted real food in days. Gracie followed, slurping the soup so fast she burned her tongue, but she didn't care. She smiled through the pain. Nathaniel watched in silence, his hands folded tightly in front of him. His gaze never left them. When the edge of their hunger had dulled, Sophie looked up. Her voice was quiet. "Thank you." Nathaniel nodded, still saying nothing. But inside, a war was being fought between the successful man he had become and the broken child he once was. Finally, Sophie asked the question he knew was coming. "Why did you help us?" He stared at the table for a moment, then looked her straight in the eyes. "Because my mom once stole food too." Sophie blinked, confused. Nathaniel's voice cracked as he continued. "She stole bread from a bakery when I was your age. She didn't have a choice. We were sleeping in our car. I remember her crying after, not because she was afraid of getting caught, but because she felt like a failure. But she saved me, and I'm only sitting here wearing this stupid suit because she chose to fight, just like you did tonight." He paused, took a breath, then added quieter, "I wouldn't be here without her." A tear rolled down his cheek. He didn't wipe it away this time. Sophie's eyes filled too. She didn't know what to say. No one had ever told her something like that, especially not someone rich, someone powerful, someone who had once been just like her. In that moment, across that booth in a tiny diner on a frozen Pittsburgh street, a bond formed, not of charity, but of understanding. A man who had clawed his way out of darkness had come face to face with 2 souls still trapped in it, and he was ready to reach back and pull them into the light. Jack didn't return to his hotel that night. Instead, he made calls. The next morning, he took the girls to a safe place, a warm shelter run by a kind woman he knew. Then he met with his legal team. Within days, he arranged to adopt Emma and Lily, giving them a new life filled with love, education, and security. But he didn't stop there. Jack created a new program through his company, Second Chance Meals, providing free food boxes to homeless children and families across the U.S. He also launched a campaign to end stigma against the poor, reminding people that not all who steal are criminals. Some are just trying to survive. Months later, Emma stood on a stage next to Jack at a company event, wearing a bright dress and holding Lily's hand. Reporters took photos. Jack gave a short speech. "These girls reminded me of where I came from. They didn't steal because they were bad. They stole because society ignored them. Poverty isn't a crime, but ignoring it is." The room went silent. Many cried. That night, Jack held Lily in his arms as she fell asleep on his chest. Emma sat beside him, reading a book. His house was full of warmth, not from the fireplace, but from love. This story reminds us that sometimes those we judge are just fighting to survive. In a society where wealth often decides worth, compassion can be the real treasure. One act of understanding can change lives, and maybe even the world.